So, my name is Jennifer Baker. I am the Deputy Archivist with Warren County Record Center and Archives. Today is July 8th, 2022, and today we are interviewing a former employee of Warren County Record Center and Archives. I'm going to let the other participants introduce themselves, so if you'd like to go ahead.
Okay, I'm Kirsten Dozier. I'm the archival intern for Warren County for the summer.
And then I will give our guest a chance to introduce themselves.
Yep, James Zimmerlin. I'm the former director of the Warren County Record Center and Archives.
Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First, we just have some general background questions. So the first question we have for you is, when and where were you born?
I was born in technically Kettering, Ohio, even though my birth record probably shows Dayton, at Kettering Hospital.
Okay.
And that was back in '81.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up born and raised Dayton, Ohio, or a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. My parents initially resided in Kettering. Shortly after I was a young kid, I spent a lot of time in Beaver Creek, I think until I was in junior high, and then I kind of floated a little bit. So was at West Carrollton schools, was at Dayton Public Schools, and then I graduated from Stebbins High School in Riverside.
Okay. Where are some places that you have lived? You kind of touched a little bit, but maybe after graduation?
Yeah, so after graduation, this will be super easy. I actually had an apartment in West Carrollton when I was shortly after graduation. I ended up getting married to my current wife, Amanda Zimmerlin, and we lived in an apartment for a few years and then moved out to Brookville, Ohio, and I've lived in Brookville ever since.
And so what are some jobs that you had prior to working for Warren County?
Yeah, so prior to working for Warren County, really my first professional job is I was an ROTC student at Wright State University working on my undergrad in history. And while I was in ROTC, a job opportunity came available at the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Just so happens the former commandant of the ROTC unit at Wright State was the executive director of the National Aviation Hall of Fame at the time, Mike Jackson. And he gave me an opportunity to work there first as a weekend supervisor that kind of just managed the exhibit floor museum which is actually resides in the Air Force Museum or the Museum of the United States Air Force. It's a wing or a section of the museum that sits between the first two hangars. So I started there as a weekend supervisor, and that kind of grew into a professional position. So my official title was building supervisor and volunteer coordinator. So I managed all the volunteers, went out and did a little bit of traveling to some air shows and spoke to different, volunteer groups. And I also got into managing all of our inductee files. So that led to me digitizing files and more archival type work while I was employed there. And then in 2000, and really that was the only professional job I had. And then I transitioned over to Warren County I probably cannot recall. You can probably look it up in my employee file. I think it was a archives and record center assistant. So, I started there full time in 2006, I believe it was, and 2006, and I still worked part time in a part time capacity for the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Actually, all the way up I think until maybe 2009, 2010. And hopefully this doesn't bleed into some of your other questions, but
if it does, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, and so I was probably at Warren County for about, gosh, maybe a year or so, and was promoted. I was promoted a couple times. So then about a year later, I was promoted to assistant archivist. And then the former director, the director, the founding director before me ended up leaving the organization. And then that's when I moved into the director role at Warren County. So.
Okay, which that kind of answers the next question, but just to clarify, so you only worked for the Record Center and Archives while you were employed for Warren County?
I'm sorry, you said
Did you work for any other departments within the county?
No, I did not. Nope, it was only the Record Center and Archives.
Okay.
And so you said you started working for Warren County in 2006. When did you transition away from Warren County?
I left Warren County in 2013, February of 2013. And I accepted a position as the records manager at CareSource, which is a Dayton-based Medicare and Medicaid managed plan. I did stay on shortly as a contract position to help the transition of the next director, which was Jennifer Haney, who is the current director now. I think I served in that role for just 2 or 3 months in a consultant role.
Okay. So you said you held a few different positions within the county. What were some of your daily tasks and duties in those various positions?
Yeah, so when I first started, the primary role then as the record center assistant was coordinating deliveries of records with to our clerk of court's office. So we had all of the clerk of court's files, and they had a regular need to pull files. And as the primary customer, they weren't the only customer. So basically, it was managing the process of pulling files, delivering files to various departments within the county, and then going back and retrieving those files and then refiling back in the appropriate containers. Did a lot of work around destruction activity. So I supported when we had our records destruction vendor come to help facilitate those disposals. Did a lot of packing, boxing, labeling, kind of organizing the record center. I'm trying to think what else. Back then we did have a micrographics department and an imaging department. That role did not really engage in those activities per se. There was some archival scanning that did take place on a very limited scale. That role also facilitated a lot of the patrons. A lot of patrons came in requesting things, so that role would help support requests from patrons or help them with research requests in a limited scale. I'm trying to think what else. That might, as my memory serves me, that's probably that was the primary role and function. There were special projects that were sprinkled in from time to time that were, I would say, more preparatory in the development of that role into the next position. So, but at the time, I will tell you, there was no assistant archivist or records manager role. So it was just a record center assistant. I believe we had a administrative person, and I don't recall the title. It might have just been an administrative assistant, and then we had micrographic staff in the back.
Yeah, those titles have changed significantly even since I've been here. So even if it was one thing then, but yeah. Okay.
So are there any coworkers or managers or others you worked with that had an impact on you? Who were they?
Oh yeah, I would say everyone on that team had an impact, particularly at different times. So, you know, Patricia Grove was the admin uh, or the administrative assistant at the front desk at the time, and she was, I would say, an older worker for me, being in my 20s. She was a very, very sweet lady, and you know, I engaged her a lot just because we sat next to each other. So always enjoyed working with her, and I had to learn a little bit from her because she was a more tenured employee at the time. And then Pam Schwartz, Pam was the director at the time. She gave me the opportunity to get that position, and I'm sure, as a lot of folks know, in archives and records management work, positions are very few and far between, particularly decent paying positions with benefits. So getting an opportunity to work there, definitely impacted me personally, and learned a lot from Pam. And she continued to give me opportunities while I was employed at Warren County. In the back, we had several different folks. We had Ed Ball, who was our, micrographics kind of guru at the time, and very quiet individual. He was previously, I believe he previously worked at or retired from the base right past an Air Force base, and this was a second kind of a retirement life. A couple interesting things about Ed, and his son was a deputy over at the sheriff's office in Warren County, and so occasionally his son would pop in and say hi. And I believe he was part of the, and I don't know, the color guard or the. He used to come in all the time in a kilt. I don't know what the formal name unit is. He would do services, or I don't know if it's not accordion, but bagpipe. I
Oh.
think it's bagpipe potentially. But he's part of that
He
unit.
did used to come in dressed in a kilt.
Yeah, he'd kilt for certain ceremonies. He'd have the
Yeah.
kilt when they do the bagpipe, I think, and stuff. So, but his son worked at the sheriff's office, and then Ed used to partly own a um, Mike or a Jersey Mike's sandwich shop, I believe, in Lebanon.
Huh.
So he did start that business, and he then sold it or got rid of it at one time. But that is an interesting fact about Ed. And then we had a couple folks that worked in the back. We had Millie, and gosh, her last name.
Papa Deck.
Yes, Papa Deck. She, she worked there for many years, and she did a lot of work with micrographics. She was very quiet. She actually lived in town in a small place in the older part of Lebanon, and her son. These are the things that are crazy that you remember. Her son used to be a musician. Millie was very much in the Beatles, but her son, I believe, played drums for a local band, and I believe her son worked at the pizza factory in downtown Dayton for a very long time. So I do remember that. We also had for a short time a lady. She actually left, and I don't recall when she left. This was still under Pam's watch as director, but Jana, and I don't remember her last name, but Jana left. But she ended up marrying, or was married to, an employee, and I don't recall his name, that worked in the IT department. And she did come back and work for the county for some time.
She recently retired in 2020.
Yeah. So Jana was there, and then we had a lady named Pat, and I don't recall her last name. I'm sorry?
Pat Womack.
Pat Womack, yes. Um, without going into great detail, she had some connections with some folks, I believe, with the prosecutor. She was good friends with the prosecutor's mother, but she had some health issues that and ended up retiring at Otterbein while I was still at Warren County. And let's see, who else? Matt, Millie, Ed. We also had Ted Hitchens, which I'm not sure if Ted still there.
He is still employed here.
He is still employed there. Okay.
Yeah.
So Ted was hired after me. He was a record center assistant. So Ted, I work with Ted quite a bit. He was a very good guy. And then what else was there? I also hired a younger staff member. Her name is Brittany. Brittany's mother used to be the a deputy clerk over the clerk of court's office, and was kind of a right-hand person for Jim Spade for some time. I think she transitioned to some other roles, and she may have left the organization. But Brittany worked for me for for several years while she was in college. She actually left and became a teacher. And wasn't terribly long ago, she actually sent a note to my wife saying hi. So that was really, really, really nice. So she's done quite well for herself. But I believe that's all I can recall from an employee standpoint.
Okay. So what is something that people might not have known about your role or position here in Warren County?
People in the sense of like other county employees, or just the general public, or?
Probably both, honestly, because I don't think a lot of other county departments were really aware of what the Record Center and Archives was.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of give you my flavor. So the Record Center and Archives, obviously there's kind of the dichotomy between archives and the Record Center. I think the county staff, with the exception of our former county administrator, really leaned on the Record Center and Archives from more of a records management perspective. So they saw it more as a facility to store records, to retrieve records, to support retention scheduling, scanning, things of that nature. It was really more of that working day functionality. I think the archives, had stronger ties to the Genealogical Society, which used to be next door to the facility, and the general public utilized the archives more than the Record Center. So I would say the county administrator really, Dave Gully, who was our former administrator, I think used to, and some of the elected officials have a stronger affinity for the archives, just because there were events, I think, that happened, some prior to me. The time capsule was planted with Pam, I think was, one of them was later opened after my time. We had a lot of just really neat historical records. We had land grants signed by some of the presidents, and we did a really good job within the archives of trying to preserve some of the more unique pieces, like some of the maps that probably are still hanging up. We had exhibits from time to time, birth, death records, all that good stuff. So the county administrator, and I think others, used to bring a lot of folks down that would not normally come there, just to kind of tout our value to the county. But there was definitely a different perception, I think, from the public, as the archives is more something that they use versus the Record Center. More, I would say, more active records, which was the benefit to the county department. So
a little off topic, but you mentioned the maps that are hanging up. Were you here when they had those framed, or was that during your time?
That was my doing. So originally the one map, I believe is it the 1803? I can't remember the dates of the maps. They were just encapsulated in Mylar, freestanding, and there was some deterioration in that Mylar because it was just such a large map and so heavy. We actually engage, and God, I can't remember his name.
Is it Charles Price?
Charles Price. He used to work there used to be a conservation business down in Cincinnati that kind of disbanded, and he kind of did his own thing. So we worked with him, which was someone that a lot of the county records managers and archivists work with. And he had a shop that was actually in the basement of his house. And we would go out, and it was over in Cincinnati, the western side of Cincinnati. And we took the maps, and we also worked with so he would work at cleaning them, encapsulating them. So the one was kind of encapsulated in Mylar. The other we found at a later date, very beautiful, very vibrant. We had them encapsulated, but then we worked with the framing company in downtown Lebanon to actually get them in more of a supportive structure that would, hopefully be a little bit more durable.
Well, they're still holding up, so they did a great job.
Good. Yeah. Honest to God, it was probably the coolest thing that I felt like I enjoyed those maps, wholeheartedly, and I think a lot of the public, every time someone would come in, it was really a centerpiece to the archives, and they would come in and see them, and just really beautiful maps. So.
So you said they were encapsulated in Mylar prior to taking them to Charles. What was the condition that those were in? Because I've heard varying stories about that.
Yeah, so the one that was the older one, I think it's the one in 18. I can't remember the dates on the map.
So there's one from 1856, which is the one that was probably more deteriorated of the two. And then there's one from 1867.
Yeah, so the one from 56 was up prior to me being there. It was hanging on some hooks. So yes, that one was in worse condition. We made some changes to the lighting, so we put UV filters on and things like that. But obviously, being out, light damage, things like that, did impact it. So we did make changes to the lighting when we encapsulated and framed the more recent map, which we found. It was weird. It was actually sitting back in the record center. So I'll tell you, the bay that was closest to the doors to the dock area used to just be a mess. So when I came on, there was just all kinds of stuff stuffed in there. They had map cabinets and all kinds of stuff. During my time, we spent a lot of time cleaning out that area, and the other area, the other alcove on the opposite side was where we had some micrographics, but that had a bunch of storage, or not storage, but where a micrographics area was, but there were some boxes and stuff there as well. We found the 67 map in the alcove closest to the loading dock area. So, and it was not in the best of shape either. And Charles Price was able to really clean it up, kind of really bring out the vibrant paint and colors and really make it look really, really nice. So, so when we hung that one on the wall, I know that one's kind of, at the time, was more facing the door, the entry door to the archives. We did have lighting. We used to keep that light off so it wouldn't have as much, light damage.
Do you happen to know what department those came from or where they originated?
I do not.
Okay.
Do not recall where those originated from.
They're still being utilized by other departments on a daily basis. So also.
Yeah, from a land history perspective, because they have the owners' names on it. So, there's just so much value.
Right.
And also the cultural, right? there's a little, those maps also bring out a little bit of the cultural aspect of the county at the time, and with the images of cows and live, things like that. So I mean, it tells a little bit about, what was really deemed important, and yeah, no, super super neat. I'm glad that they're being used still.
So are there any memorable projects you helped with over the years besides, the maps?
Yeah, so obviously cleaning, I spend a lot of time. I'm a bit of a type A personality, so I think you kind of have to be, and obviously I'm probably more records manager than archivist from that regard. So I spent a lot of time, and I will say Pat Grove, who was the admin at the time, was also type A. And so actually after Pam left, we spent a lot of time in the archives. And Ted can actually speak to this because I think I think I made Ted do a lot of this work too. Reorganizing all of our shelving so that they're measured precisely and the books all look nice and uniform out in the reading area. And we positioned the desks a certain way and tried to put in pieces. We framed certain prints, like some of, I think, with the SOA posters, because I just thought those were really, really neat. And really tried to make it a nice, comfortable vibe when you came into the archives and just really somewhere you wanted to be. And I think the maps did that as well. And then actually during my time, we started doing the exhibits. So we had a Civil War exhibit. God, I can't remember. We actually found this beautiful case, and I believe it's actually, it may still be up in the rotunda up in the main building. But we found this old glass case that was just perfect for like a museum exhibit. And I had I tasked Pat with, because she really loved just restoring stuff and painting and doing all this stuff, is she actually restored that exhibit case. And the first exhibit that was in there was a Civil War exhibit, kind of about Civil War at the time. And I think we got some models, and we really had a lot of fun with it. So definitely had a lot of fun with, trying to make the record center more inviting, and to really kind of display some of the really neat pieces that we had in doing the exhibits as well. So we had a few of those, some other projects. I'm trying to think what else we did. And back in the back, so I kind of put together a strategic plan on expanding some of the space in the archive. So some of the shelving that we had, I was able to do some work related to adding some shelving in the back. I thought that was important. Also, some of our capabilities in our micrographics and digitization area. I was able to convince Beth Deckard, who was the county recorder, who I reported to at the time through the microfilm committee or board. We were able to get a book scanner, so we were able to get some more of the latest and greatest technology. So we got a book scanner, we got a wide format scanner to scan some of our maps. So we were able to digitize and make some of those things available to the public, because I have a background, in library and information science as well. So I'm always thinking about how people seek and use information. And it's like, hey, we really need to get as much as we can out. So at the time, I'm trying to think, I think Warren County, when we got that book scanner, we may have been the first county to get, or one of the early counties to actually get a really nice book scanner, as a camera. I'm sure you guys have transitioned on by the time, but tried to keep up with some of the technology as best we could. So those are some of the projects that I really, really enjoyed while I was there.
Okay, so what was the transition from colleague to department head like for you?
So I was very, very young. So I think I took over as a director at 26. So, in my time as being a leader and looking back or reflecting on what was challenging. So I will say, Pam, I think Pam, when she left, she was about 38 or 39. So she definitely had, I think a different lens in how I was looking at things. Initially, when I took over, I will tell you, I and got into more of the management aspect of the work. I looked at how Pam did things and how I did things, and there were definitely some disparities that I discovered in how I wanted to do things. And a little bit of how I did things was related to my immaturity as a leader. There were things that I was, how do I say? I think you're very reactive when you first transition into a leadership role. Like, everything is really significant, and as you grow and move up the chain, and particularly like in the organization I'm at now, you learn to be very patient as a leader. And so it definitely took a lot of times to develop the patience, not only from a management of people, but from just a management of politics and how things really work. Because what you think is important may not be as important to everyone else, and you just don't have that perspective, I think, when you're young and in a leadership role. So yeah, would be very different today if I was in that capacity or had that same opportunity again. So
Right, and you had the unique experience of working with your predecessor and training your replacement. So what was that like for you?
yeah, so again, I learned a tremendous amount from Pam. Pam was definitely, I think, more archives focused. So I learned a lot of archival because, my background's I had a history degree. So definitely working with her, the records management piece of it, it's kind of like working on a car, right? It's not as, I don't even know what the right word is, but it's, archives a little more artistic, right? You have to, or more scientific. I don't know. There's a little bit, you have to know what you need to do to restore documents or, assess things in a certain way. Records management is very prescriptive, right? It's dealing with regulation laws and it's kind of like a formula. So records management was very easy for me to manage. But working with Pam, she did teach me a lot about archival work and preservation, conservation work. And so I learned a lot from her regarding that. It was very interesting transitioning. There were a lot of things I didn't know that I had to learn on my own. And a lot of lessons where I was like, boy, if I could do that over again, I would have done, done this differently or asked her this. So in transitioning to when I helped transition Jen into her role, I tried to share some of the lessons that I learned. But I think anyone in a newer role, you want to make it your own. So again, kind of going back to me talking about wanting to rearrange the record center and do things, I think every leader or every, within, a business area or group or whatever organization, they want to put their own flavor or their own mark or own stamp on the formation or the development in the future of the organization. So, I didn't realize at the time, but at the same time, sometimes you kind of ignore the lessons or why people did things they did in the past. So again, going back to Pam, I never understood the reasoning of some of the things she did initially, and I kind of did my own thing. And then over time, I kind of like, that's why she did what she did, or maybe this is why she did what she did, and starting to kind of step back and think about, those things. So coming on, I was making changes or wanting to do things very quickly, and I'm sure, I don't know if Jen will have the same perspective, but I think trying to share, that was probably the most important thing for me to try to share. Whether she got it or not, I don't know, but that's for her. But that would be my perspective.
Okay. So those are the departmental specific questions that we had. And then now we're just going to ask general questions about Warren County.
Did anything specific happen within the county government during your time as an employee?
You know, it was kind of boring. I would say, obviously the biggest impacts from a county perspective on the archives, there really wasn't a lot of, Warren County is obviously at the time was one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Ohio. But from an impact to the Record Center and archives, Dave Gawley was the county administrator. So there really wasn't a lot of change from a staffing perspective. I would say the two biggest changes were more related to some of the politics of the time. So my understanding, again, just as my understanding, is that there was some interesting dynamics in the Republican Party in Warren County, which controlled the vast majority of the elected positions. The two changes, the sheriff changed hands, which really didn't have an impact to the archives or record center in any way, shape, or form, because the sheriff did not serve on any of the boards or commissions that we were associated with, which Micrographics Board and I think the Records Commission. Most of the authority at the time came through the Micrographics Board, which was accountable to Beth Deckard, who was the recorder at the time. So she was really the person I reported to, and a lot of the way the budget work flowed was really kind of through her. So I worked with her very closely, and we had a really, really great working relationship. Beth Deckard, if anyone didn't say, was just a really, really, really sweet individual, just super professional, and I really, really enjoyed working with her and for her. The other transition, I think, which was more impactful to, I would say, the Record Center and Archives, was the prosecutor. So our former prosecutor, and I don't recall their name, I can't remember if he lost the election or retired, but he, Fornshell, ended up winning that, and he was, I think, a stronger personality in the county from a political perspective. And then there were a couple others. So the auditor, God, I can't remember. Nelson?
Nick Nelson.
Nelson. Nick Nelson, was there for a long time, and then towards the end of my tenure, I believe, or maybe after my tenure, now I'm thinking about it, but I know that he was transitioning out, and I know Matt Nolan was working his way up. And then our treasurer, we did have a transition, but I was still there for that. And again, I know his first name's Jim. I can't remember his. I can't remember. Jim Allman was there. I know he's no longer in that position, but really nice guy, really supportive. So all of I would say the old guard was very supportive, and I think Mr. Fornshell was very supportive. I had very, very limited interaction with him. The only interaction I really had was picking the new deputy, the new director for the Record Center Archives. And then obviously Linda Oda, I left the organization shortly after Linda took over. Gosh, it might have been a month after she was in office. I had gotten the position the company had reached out, and where I've been with for the last decade. So yeah, I would say the most impactful thing, at least, was some of the transition of the elected officials.
Okay. So what is some advice that you might have for current Warren County employees?
That's very interesting. I don't know the political, obviously I think politics plays a lot. I am actually, I don't know if you know, or I didn't mention this, I am actually an elected official today. I am the vice mayor for the city of Brookville. So I think some of my role in Warren County probably led to some of my interest in being an elected official today. I would just say, you just have to be mindful of the politics. It does impact to maybe a smaller degree to the art record center and archives, but networking is very, very important, and just continuing to demonstrate your value. I think the biggest thing is that we are records and archives is using taxpayer dollars, and being able to be a good steward and of those funds, and showing a benefit to the community is the biggest driver. And I think that's probably the message I would send any public employee, is that you just have to be mindful of that.
Okay.
What are some of the most important things you learned from working for the county?
Patience. As a leader, it was patience. It's patience and again with your staff. It was also actually probably one of the biggest things is learning that a lot of individuals, right, they have strengths and weaknesses, and as a leader, I would say that was my first real leadership role, is learning how do you help people build on their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. And so I really tried to do that. There were some things that I would, obviously alter or change the way people did work, or maybe if I knew an employee was stronger in one thing than another, I would try to change that. I think with folks or other leaders within the organization or within the county, it was just, obviously establishing a good network and a good relationship. I would try to meet with folks and regularly, and I don't know if I learned this in my current role or back then, but obviously it's just, understanding how to better support them, right? I think the archives, right, is really a benefit to the public for the most part, but the record center is really a support service for the rest of the county, and really figuring out how can I provide a better service to those other county departments is, I think, is really critical. We were always looking at, my mindset was we were looking at trying to figure out how could we add value. At the time, Montgomery County was, we used to store our microfilm because they had a, temperature control vault and all that good stuff, where I was like, always like, well, maybe we can partner with other municipalities to help support their records management services, and actually have because a lot of them they don't have the funds or public dollars to support a formal records manager, or support destruction activities. So maybe there was a way to become a revenue source or revenue stream to support to provide those services out to some of the other communities within Warren County. So we were kind of looking at that. That was towards the later part. So those sorts of things is, what I learned is what is the value that I bring to I brought to the county? How can I provide better value to my customers, which were all the other departments? And then how can I actually support the Archives and Records Center by adding, maybe creating a revenue stream to support or fund the department for, future growth and other activities.
Okay. Well, and that's honestly something that we've been working on regularly, like in baby steps to do that. So some of that information is coming to fruition now, this long after you've not been here. So we are creating a 20th anniversary exhibit for the Warren County Record Center and Archives, which is where it kind of spurred us getting in touch with former employees. But is there anything from your time here that you think would be great to be included? Any information, anything about the people who worked here, some of the changes that happened? Like, is there anything significant that you think is worthy of being included in that exhibit that other people should know about the Record Center and Archives?
That's a great question. I think if anything, I mean, it's I think for me the most impactful thing is just the amount of people that the Record Center and Archives serves. So it's just really showing all the connecting pieces. So I mean, I remember we had folks. It was funny. I know this has been fixed, but early on, when we had issues with adoption records, all the counties had different guidelines for on the probate side on what adoption records were open, weren't open, and starting some of those initiatives, because that really started during my time. There were a lot of discussions at Karma, and I know I had with other county records managers, Jillian Hill. I think if I was going to highlight anything, it's just the impact that our records have to the citizens of Warren County. We had time and time again, even outside, just people coming in asking for public records requests that were related to finding just their family history. Some of it was, I mean, we had one time, I know Pat Grove did a lot of work helping a particular individual with their adoption records, and ended up finding their brother. I mean, through the records at the county, and just the impact that has on folks. I would also say the impact it has on other counties. I mean, just in demonstrating the legislative change that we had down the road, and I think it took a lot of years, but changing the probate record law so that it's more uniform to be able to start being able to display those. I think is really critical for people who are doing genealogy or maybe even finding a long lost relative. I think those are the things that people need to see. Is just the value that brings.
Okay.
All right. One last question. What do you miss the most about working for Warren County?
That's a great question too.
It's not the commute, I'm assuming, from Brookville to Lebanon.
So actually, I'll tell you, I love the commute. So I don't know if you know this about me. I have 4 kids. At the time, so when I first got hired, I just had my daughter in 2006. So I had a brand new baby. But I have twins, identical twin boys, and my twins were born while I was there. And I had a son that was at that time was only 14 months old. So I had 3 babies in the house at once. So I will tell you, my 50-minute commute to and from work was the only piece that I had in my days. So I love the commute. No, I mean, I'll tell you what I miss. What I miss the most is, I would be cliche to say I loved all the people I work with, but I really, really love the archives. I was very passionate about all of the wonderful information, and there's so much stuff that I'm sure that even you all haven't even been able to uncover. There's just so much back there in those bays, and the thing I miss the most is being able to find that gem, that treasure, like the map that that 1867 map, and being able to display it and share it, and that's just an awesome feeling to see that. And then it's even better to have some patron come in and see it, and it changes their life, or they're just in awe. That's the best feeling. So I do miss that. That was always.
And I'll be honest, it is like that here still, where we're constantly finding stuff and people come in asking for things, and like, we could have it, like it could be buried, but yeah, it's still the same dynamic. Yep. Where we're constantly finding something new. Okay, so those are all the questions that we have for you. Please feel free to share any additional information you think would add, value to this oral history.
Yeah.
So if there's anything else.
I can't think of anything. I'm probably going to be thinking about this all day now, because I don't think about my old job that often, but
right.
I'm sure there are things that happen that it's been 10 years ago since I left there, and I don't know. I like the smell.
Yeah. I think
I'm sure everyone says that who's an archivist, but there's just a unique smell that you just never that never leaves you. So
Well, I mean, if there's anything that you can think of past this recording, we would be happy for you to share that information with us.
yeah.
So if you don't have anything else, I think the last thing that I have for you is we will be sharing this recording on our social media sites, on our YouTube, and then it will also be saved at the archives permanently. So I just wanted to get a verbal agreement that that is okay, that we share this information with the public.
Oh yeah, all good.
Okay, great. So, I mean, if there's nothing else that you have for us, we are extremely appreciative of you being here and sharing your information. And it's helped fill a lot of the gaps of knowledge that we have about the archives. And it's been really fun to put our history together and to still have the people who, were part of those early days, come and share their information with us. So.
Oh no, happy to do it. I'm just curious though. You have to share if there was anything that I said that you're like, it was a connection for you.
I think everything was really useful information. So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. If I could actually first just get you to smile at the camera for me, so I can use that that image as the thumbnail. I
Yeah.
would appreciate that. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So.